Have you ever felt like you're not enough? Like no matter what you do, people will eventually leave? Like there's something fundamentally broken about you that makes you unlovable? If you're nodding right now, you're not alone. Millions of people carry invisible wounds from rejection, wounds that shape every relationship, every decision, and every dream. But what if I told you these wounds don't have to define your story? Today, we're exploring Healing the Wounds of Rejection by Joyce Meyer and Ginger Stash, a revolutionary book that's changing how people understand and overcome the pain of rejection. This isn't just another self-help book. It's a roadmap written by two women who have walked through the fire of devastating rejection and emerged stronger. Joyce Meyer survived childhood sexual abuse and built a global ministry reaching millions. Ginger Stash watched her 15-year marriage nearly crumble when her husband's secret addiction was exposed. Together, they've discovered something profound. Rejection wounds can become the very places where God's healing power transforms us most dramatically. If you're tired of feeling like damaged goods, if you're exhausted from trying to prove your worth, if you're ready to stop running from love because you're afraid of being hurt again, these next 45 minutes contain life-changing insights that have already freed thousands of people. This isn't about pretending rejection doesn't hurt. It's about discovering a love so deep, so secure, so unshakable that no human rejection can touch it. It's about moving from survival mode to thriving mode, from wounded to whole, from guarded to genuinely confident. Your healing journey starts now. Chapter 1, The Hidden Epidemic, Why Rejection Wounds Run So Deep. Picture this: a 5-year-old girl watches her daddy walk out the door for the last time. A teenager gets cut from the team he trained all summer for. A wife discovers her husband's been living a double life. An employee gets passed over for promotion again. Different scenarios, same devastating message. You're not valuable enough. This is the reality of rejection. It's everywhere, and it's destroying lives from the inside out. What many people don't realize is that rejection isn't just an emotional hurt that fades with time. It creates what psychologists call rejection sensitivity, an invisible wound that makes us hypersensitive to any sign of disapproval or abandonment. Think about it this way: if you touch a hot stove and get burned, you become cautious around stoves. But rejection wounds make us cautious around love itself. We start seeing rejection everywhere, even when it's not there. A friend doesn't text back immediately, and we assume they hate us. Our boss gives feedback, and we hear you're worthless. Our spouse has a bad day, and we're convinced they're planning to leave. Here's the shocking truth. Rejection wounds create a cycle where we actually attract more rejection. When we expect to be hurt, we either push people away before they can hurt us, or we become so desperate for approval that we exhaust others with our neediness. It's like wearing rejection-colored glasses that filter everything through the lens of "I'm not good enough." Joyce Meyer lived this cycle for decades. After years of childhood abuse, she expected rejection from everyone, including her husband, Dave. She tried controlling him, demanding his constant attention, and getting angry when he couldn't fill the bottomless pit of her need for validation. The more she tried to force love, the more she pushed it away. But here's where the story gets incredible. During one of her desperate prayers asking God to change Dave, she heard something that changed everything. "Joyce, Dave isn't the problem. You are." Instead of being offended, she realized this was the beginning of her freedom. For the first time, she understood that her rejection wounds were driving behaviors that were sabotaging the very love she craved. Ginger Stash discovered this same truth when her husband's addiction was exposed. Her first instinct was to build walls, protect herself, and prepare for the worst. But she realized she had a choice: let rejection define her story, or use this crisis as an opportunity for deeper healing and authentic love. The science backs this up. Research shows that people with deep rejection wounds have overactive threat detection systems. Their brains are constantly scanning for signs of rejection, which creates a state of chronic stress that affects everything from decision-making to physical health. But here's the hope. The same neuroplasticity that created these patterns can also heal them. So how do you break free from rejection's grip? It starts with recognition. Most people don't realize how much their past rejections are controlling their present relationships. They think they're being realistic or protective when they're actually being controlled by fear. The first step is what the authors call rejection awareness. Start paying attention to your automatic thoughts when you feel hurt or disappointed. Do you immediately assume the worst about people's intentions? Do you start planning your exit strategy the moment someone seems distant? Do you find yourself constantly trying to prove your worth? Here's a practical exercise. For the next 3 days, notice when you feel that familiar sting of rejection. Instead of immediately reacting, pause and ask yourself, is this really about what just happened, or is this an old wound being triggered? You might be surprised how often current situations are just poking at ancient hurts. The beautiful truth is that recognizing rejection wounds is the first step toward healing them. You can't heal what you don't acknowledge, but once you see these patterns clearly, you can begin the journey toward genuine freedom. Your healing doesn't depend on other people treating you perfectly. It doesn't require finding someone who will never hurt or disappoint you. True healing comes from discovering a love so secure, so unchanging, so complete that human rejection loses its power to define you. Action step: write down 3 times in your life when you felt deeply rejected. Notice if you can see any patterns and how these experiences still affect your relationships today. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness that leads to freedom. Chapter 2: The Lies Rejection Tells, Dismantling False Beliefs About Your Worth. Rejection is a masterful liar. It doesn't just hurt, it rewrites your entire story about who you are and what you deserve. It whispers lies so consistently that you start believing their facts about your identity. Listen to rejection's greatest hits. You're too much. You're not enough. If people really knew you, they'd leave. You're damaged goods. Love always comes with conditions. You have to earn your place in people's lives. Something is fundamentally wrong with you. Sound familiar? These aren't random thoughts. They're the toxic programming that rejection downloads into your mind. And here's the devastating part. Once you believe these lies, you start living in ways that make them seem true. When you believe you're too much, you shrink yourself, hide your personality, and apologize for taking up space. When you believe you're not enough, you exhaust yourself trying to become someone worthy of love. When you believe love is conditional, you turn relationships into performance reviews where you're constantly afraid of failing. Ginger Stash lived this nightmare after discovering her husband's addiction. The rejection she felt didn't just hurt, it rewrote her entire identity. Suddenly, she wasn't the confident woman who had built a successful career and ministry. She was the wife who wasn't enough to keep her husband faithful. She was the woman who had failed at marriage. She was damaged, embarrassing, a cautionary tale. But here's what changed everything for Ginger. She realized these weren't facts, they were lies. The same man who had betrayed her was also fighting desperately to save their marriage because he recognized her incredible worth. The addiction wasn't about her inadequacy, it was about his brokenness. She had confused his poor choices with her value as a person. This is rejection's cruelest trick. It makes other people's behavior about us. When someone rejects us, we don't think they're having a bad day, or we're not a good fit, or they're dealing with their own issues. We think I'm rejectable, and there's something wrong with me. Joyce Meyer spent decades trapped in this mental prison. Every time Dave needed space or had different preferences, she interpreted it as proof that she was unlovable. When he wanted to watch sports instead of talking, it meant he didn't value her. When he didn't respond the way she expected, it meant she wasn't important to him. The breakthrough came when Joyce realized she was living by a completely false belief system. She had confused love with control, worth with performance, and security with others' approval. The lies of rejection had become the foundation of her entire relationship approach. Here's the life-changing truth both women discovered. Your worth was established before you were born, not determined by how others treat you. You were loved into existence by a God who knew exactly who you would become, including all your flaws, failures, and imperfections, and called you precious anyway. Think about it. If your value came from human approval, it would change constantly based on others' moods, opinions, and limitations. You'd be worthless to people who don't understand you and priceless to those who do. That's not value, that's chaos. But when you understand that your worth is built into your DNA by your Creator, everything changes. Other people's rejection says something about them, their preferences, their capacity, their current situation, but it says nothing about your fundamental value. This doesn't mean rejection stops hurting. It means the hurt doesn't have to rewrite your identity. You can feel disappointed without feeling worthless. You can experience loss without believing you're losable. You can be rejected by some people while remaining completely convinced that you're lovable. Joyce Meyer describes this transformation. I went from being a woman who needed Dave's approval to survive to being a woman who enjoyed Dave's love as a gift. I stopped trying to extract validation from him and started receiving affection from him. The difference was life-changing. Here's how to start dismantling rejection's lies in your own life. Every time you catch yourself thinking something negative about your worth based on someone's behavior, stop and ask, is this a fact or a feeling? Feelings are temporary and situation-based. Facts about your value are permanent and God-based. Create what the authors call a truth arsenal, a collection of biblical statements about your identity that you can use to counter rejection's lies. When rejection whispers, "You're too much," truth declares, "You are fearfully and wonderfully made." When rejection hisses, "You're not enough," truth proclaims, "You are complete in Christ." The most powerful lie rejection tells is that healing isn't possible, that you'll always be damaged, always be vulnerable, always be one rejection away from falling apart. But thousands of people have proven this lie wrong by discovering the unshakable foundation of God's love. Action step: identify the most persistent lie rejection has told you about yourself. Write it down, then write the opposite truth next to it. Every time that lie surfaces this week, immediately speak the truth out loud. Your mind needs to hear a different voice than rejection's whisper. Chapter 3: The Foundation of Unshakable Love, Discovering Your True Source of Security. Imagine having a love account that never runs empty, a source of acceptance that never wavers based on your performance, a security so deep that human rejection becomes disappointing but not devastating. This isn't fantasy, it's the reality of understanding God's love for you. Most people approach love like beggars approaching different houses, hoping someone will give them enough approval, affection, and acceptance to feel valuable. But this approach guarantees disappointment because people are limited, flawed, and dealing with their own issues. Even the most loving person can't fill the God-sized hole in your heart. Joyce Meyer spent years trying to turn her husband into her source of security. She needed him to be perfectly attentive, completely available, and constantly affirming. When he fell short of this impossible standard, she felt rejected and unloved. She was asking him to be God in her life, and no human can handle that pressure. The transformation began when Joyce realized she had been looking for love in the wrong place. Not because human love is bad, but because it was never designed to be her primary source of security. God's love is the foundation. Human love is the beautiful addition. Think of it this way: if you're dying of thirst, a cup of water feels like everything. But if you live near a fresh spring, a cup of water is a nice refreshment but not a life-or-death necessity. When you're secure in God's love, human love becomes a joy rather than a desperate need. Ginger Stash discovered this truth through her marriage crisis. When her husband's addiction was revealed, she had two choices: let this rejection destroy her sense of worth, or use it as an opportunity to build her security on something unshakable. She chose the second option and found something incredible, a love that couldn't be threatened by human failure. Here's what makes God's love different from human love. It's not based on your performance, your attractiveness, your success, or your ability to meet someone's needs. It's based on His character and His choice to love you. This love existed before you were born, continues when you fail, and will never end based on your behavior. This isn't theological theory, it's practical reality. When you truly grasp that the Creator of the universe is absolutely crazy about you, other people's opinions start to feel less crucial. When you know you're completely accepted by perfect love, imperfect love from flawed people becomes a bonus rather than a necessity. But here's where many people get stuck. They try to feel God's love through their emotions rather than choosing to believe it through their will. God's love isn't a feeling you have to conjure up. It's a fact you choose to accept regardless of how you feel. Joyce Meyer explains it this way: I had to stop waiting to feel loved and start choosing to believe I was loved. Feelings follow faith, not the other way around. When I consistently chose to believe God's word about His love for me, my emotions eventually caught up with my faith. This shift changes everything about how you approach relationships. Instead of entering relationships from emptiness, hoping others will fill you up, you enter from fullness, having something beautiful to share. Instead of being desperate for approval, you can be generous with love. Instead of being controlled by fear of rejection, you can be motivated by excitement about connection. The practical difference is dramatic. When someone is having a bad day, you don't assume it's about you. When someone disagrees with you, you don't question your worth. When someone chooses differently than you hoped, you're disappointed but not devastated. This doesn't mean you become emotionally numb or stop caring about relationships. It means you care from a place of security rather than desperation. You love people because you're full of love, not because you need them to prove your value. Ginger Stash describes her transformation. I went from being a woman whose happiness depended on my husband's behavior to being a woman whose joy came from God's love expressed through my marriage. When the foundation changed, everything else got better. Here's how to begin building this foundation in your own life. Start each day by reminding yourself of 3 truths. I am completely loved by God. My worth is not determined by others' behavior, and I have everything I need for security and joy. Say these truths whether you feel them or not. When rejection hits, immediately redirect your attention to God's love rather than spiraling into self-doubt. Ask yourself, how does God see me right now? The answer is always the same: completely loved, fully accepted, entirely valuable. Practice what the authors call love sourcing, consciously drawing your sense of security from God's love rather than human approval. When you feel that familiar hunger for validation, turn to prayer, scripture, or worship, instead of turning to people with the desperate energy that pushes them away. The miracle of this foundation is that it actually makes you more lovable to others. When you're not desperately needy, people are drawn to your peace. When you're not constantly seeking validation, others feel safe to be authentic with you. When you're secure in love, you become a source of love for others. Action step: choose one relationship where you've been looking to that person for too much validation. For the next week, before every interaction with them, remind yourself, I am already completely loved by God. This person's response to me doesn't change my value. Notice how this shifts the dynamic between you. Chapter 4. Breaking the walls we build, moving from protection to connection. After rejection wounds us, we do something that seems smart but actually sabotages our healing. We build walls. These walls promise to protect us from future pain, but they end up becoming prisons that keep out the very love we need to heal. These walls come in many forms. Some people build walls of perfection. If I'm flawless, no one can find fault with me. Others build walls of distance. If I don't get close, I can't be hurt. Some construct walls of control. If I manage everything perfectly, nothing bad will happen. Still others hide behind walls of anger. If I'm intimidating, no one will dare reject me. Joyce Meyer built walls of control and anger. After years of abuse and abandonment, she decided she would never be vulnerable again. She became demanding, critical, and emotionally distant. If Dave didn't meet her expectations perfectly, she would withdraw her love as punishment. She thought she was protecting herself, but she was actually creating the very rejection she feared. The tragic irony of walls is that they do protect you from pain. But they also protect you from love, joy, intimacy, and healing. You can't selectively shut down your heart. When you close yourself off from hurt, you also close yourself off from help. Ginger Stash felt the temptation to build massive walls after her husband's betrayal. Every instinct screamed at her to protect herself, to never be vulnerable again, to assume the worst about people's motives. But she realized that if she built these walls, her husband's addiction would destroy not just their marriage, but her capacity for future love. Here's the painful truth about walls. They're often invisible to us but obvious to others. We think we're being strong and self-sufficient, but others experience us as cold, distant, or unapproachable. Our walls don't just keep pain out, they keep people out. Think about someone you know who's been deeply hurt and built walls in response. How do you feel around them? You probably sense their guardedness, feel their emotional unavailability, and find yourself being more cautious too. Walls are contagious. They create the very distance and rejection they were built to prevent. But here's the hope. Walls can be torn down. Not all at once, not recklessly, but gradually and wisely as you learn to trust again. The key is understanding that true protection doesn't come from walls. It comes from wisdom, boundaries, and most importantly, an unshakable foundation of love. Joyce Meyer describes the difference. Walls are built from fear and keep everyone out. Boundaries are built from wisdom and keep the right people in while keeping harmful behavior out. I had to learn the difference between protecting my heart and hardening my heart. Breaking down walls requires courage, but it also requires strategy. You don't tear down all your walls at once and become vulnerable to everyone. You start by identifying which walls are actually serving you, healthy boundaries, and which ones are hurting you, fear-based protection. Healthy boundaries protect your time, energy, and values. They're flexible, reasonable, and based on wisdom rather than fear. Fear-based walls, on the other hand, are rigid, extreme, and based on past pain rather than present reality. They assume the worst about people's motives and make intimacy impossible. The process starts with small risks with safe people. Ginger Stash began by being honest with trusted friends about her marriage struggles instead of pretending everything was fine. She shared her fears and needs instead of trying to appear strong and independent. Each positive experience gave her courage to risk a little more vulnerability. Joyce Meyer started by acknowledging her controlling behavior instead of justifying it. She began asking Dave for what she needed instead of demanding it. She practiced receiving his love as a gift rather than extracting it as a requirement. Each step felt scary, but also brought them closer together. Here's what both women discovered. The right people won't hurt you for being vulnerable. They'll love you for being real. And the wrong people will reveal themselves quickly when you stop pretending to be perfect, which actually protects you from wasting time on relationships that weren't authentic anyway. The fear that keeps walls in place is usually some version of if people really knew me, they'd leave. But the opposite is usually true. When people really know you, including your struggles, fears, and imperfections, those who truly love you will love you more, not less. This doesn't mean being vulnerable with everyone or sharing your deepest struggles with people who haven't earned that trust. Wisdom means starting small, with safe people, and gradually expanding your circle of authentic relationships as you heal. The miracle of torn-down walls is that they create space for the very thing that heals rejection wounds: genuine love and acceptance. When someone loves you at your worst, knows you at your messiest, and chooses you at your most difficult, it begins to heal the lie that you're unlovable. Joyce Meyer puts it this way: I discovered that the very vulnerability I was afraid would drive Dave away actually drew him closer. When I stopped trying to be perfect and started being real, our marriage went from surviving to thriving. Here's how to start safely dismantling your walls. Identify one person who has consistently shown you love and acceptance. Choose one area where you've been pretending to be stronger or better than you are. Practice being honest about this struggle with that person. Notice their response and let it teach you about the safety of selective vulnerability. Action step: think about one wall you've built to protect yourself from rejection. Ask yourself, is this wall protecting me or imprisoning me? If it's imprisoning you, choose one small way to be more authentic with one safe person this week. Chapter 5. Forgiveness as Freedom, Releasing Others and Yourself. Here's a truth that might surprise you. The people who hurt you don't need your forgiveness as much as you need to give it. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It keeps rejection wounds infected, prevents healing, and gives your rejectors ongoing power to control your emotions and choices. But forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood concepts in healing from rejection. Most people think forgiveness means pretending the hurt didn't happen, trusting people who haven't changed, or allowing continued mistreatment. That's not forgiveness, that's foolishness. True forgiveness is a choice to release your right to punish someone for their wrongs against you. It's choosing to stop carrying the weight of their debt in your heart. It's refusing to let their failure define your future. And here's the liberating truth: you can forgive someone without trusting them, reconciling with them, or even having a relationship with them. Joyce Meyer had to make this choice regarding her abusive father. For years, she carried the poison of bitterness, anger, and hatred. She thought her unforgiveness was punishing him, but it was actually torturing her. Every day, his past actions continued to wound her through her present unforgiveness. The turning point came when Joyce realized that forgiveness wasn't about her father deserving it. It was about her deserving freedom from it. She forgave him not because he earned it, but because she needed to be free from the prison of bitterness that was destroying her joy, relationships, and peace. Ginger Stash faced a different but equally challenging forgiveness journey. Her husband's betrayal felt like a death, the death of trust, security, and the marriage she thought she had. The temptation was to hold onto the hurt as protection, to use it as evidence of his failure, and to punish him with ongoing bitterness. But Ginger discovered something powerful. Unforgiveness was keeping her stuck in the past, while forgiveness would free her to create a different future. Whether her marriage survived or not, she needed to be free from the poison of resentment that was eating away at her peace and joy. Here's what makes forgiveness so difficult. We think the other person needs to change first. We wait for apologies that may never come, for acknowledgement that may never happen, for understanding that may never arrive. Meanwhile, we stay chained to people who may have moved on with their lives while we remain stuck in our pain. Forgiveness breaks this chain. It says, "Your behavior was wrong, it caused real damage, and it hurt deeply, and I'm choosing to be free from carrying that weight anymore." It doesn't minimize the wrong or excuse the behavior. It simply refuses to let the wrong continue causing damage through bitterness. But forgiveness isn't just about others. It's also about forgiving yourself. Many people carry crushing guilt about their responses to rejection. They're ashamed of how desperate they became, how they compromised their values trying to earn love, or how they hurt others from their own wounded places. Joyce Meyer had to forgive herself for years of controlling, manipulative behavior that flowed from her rejection wounds. She had to release the shame of how she had treated Dave when she was operating from fear rather than love. This self-forgiveness was just as crucial as forgiving others. Self-forgiveness requires understanding that hurt people, and that includes yourself. Your worst behavior probably came from your deepest wounds. This doesn't excuse harmful actions, but it does explain them in a way that opens the door to grace rather than condemnation. The process of forgiveness often happens in layers. You might forgive someone intellectually before you forgive them emotionally. You might have good days and setback days. You might need to choose forgiveness repeatedly as new aspects of the hurt surface. This is normal and doesn't mean you're failing at forgiveness. Ginger Stash describes it this way: "Forgiveness wasn't a one-time decision, it was a daily choice. Some days it felt easy and natural. Other days it felt impossible and forced. But each day I chose it, I felt a little freer from the past and a little more hopeful about the future." Here's a practical approach to forgiveness. Start by acknowledging the full extent of the hurt. Don't minimize it or pretend it wasn't that bad. Let yourself feel the appropriate anger and sadness. Then, when you're ready, choose to release your right to punish that person not because they deserve it, but because you deserve freedom. Prayer can be powerful in this process, even if you don't feel ready to forgive. You can pray, "God, I'm not ready to forgive this person, but I want to be ready. Help me get there." Honesty with God about your struggle opens the door for His help in the process. Forgiveness doesn't mean the relationship returns to what it was before. Trust is different from forgiveness. Forgiveness can be given immediately, but trust must be rebuilt over time through consistent, trustworthy behavior. You can forgive someone completely while still maintaining healthy boundaries to protect yourself from future harm. The miracle of forgiveness is that it transforms you from a victim into a victor. When you choose forgiveness, you're no longer defined by what was done to you, but by the choice you made in response to it. You move from being controlled by past hurts to being empowered by present choices. Joyce Meyer puts it perfectly: "Forgiveness set me free to love without fear, trust without desperation, and live without the constant weight of past hurts dragging me down. It didn't change my past, but it completely changed my future." Action step: identify one person you need to forgive, including yourself. You don't have to feel ready or willing yet. Simply acknowledge that unforgiveness is hurting you more than them. Ask God to help you want to forgive, even if you can't do it yet. This is the first step toward freedom. Chapter 6. Building healthy relationships, attracting and maintaining authentic connections. Once you begin healing from rejection wounds, something beautiful happens. You start attracting healthier people and creating more authentic relationships. But this doesn't happen automatically. It requires learning new relationship skills and unlearning old patterns that attracted the wrong people or repelled the right ones. Most people with rejection wounds approach relationships from scarcity rather than abundance. They're so grateful when someone shows them attention that they ignore red flags, tolerate disrespect, and settle for crumbs of affection. Or they're so afraid of being hurt that they keep everyone at arm's length, missing opportunities for genuine connection. Joyce Meyer spent years in the first category, so desperate for love that she clung to anyone who showed her attention, regardless of how they treated her. She confused intensity with intimacy, drama with passion, and need with love. Her relationships were exhausting because they were built on desperation rather than choice. The transformation began when Joyce learned to value herself enough to require others to treat her well. This didn't mean becoming demanding or high maintenance. It meant establishing clear standards about how she would and wouldn't allow herself to be treated, then consistently maintaining those standards regardless of how others responded. Ginger Stash learned this lesson through rebuilding her marriage after her husband's addiction was revealed. She had to learn the difference between supporting someone's healing and enabling their dysfunction. She discovered that love sometimes says no, that kindness sometimes requires consequences, and that grace doesn't mean the absence of boundaries. Here's the counterintuitive truth about healthy relationships. They require you to be willing to lose them. When you're desperate to keep a relationship at any cost, you'll compromise your values, ignore your needs, and enable bad behavior. But when you're willing to lose a relationship rather than lose yourself, you create the safety necessary for genuine intimacy. This doesn't mean being ready to abandon people at the first sign of conflict. It means being committed to authentic connection even when it's difficult, while refusing to settle for fake harmony that avoids addressing real issues. Healthy relationships thrive on truth, even when truth is uncomfortable. The key is learning to distinguish between people's character and their circumstances. Everyone goes through difficult seasons, makes mistakes, and has bad days. Character is revealed not by perfection, but by how people handle their imperfections. Do they take responsibility or blame others? Do they work toward change or make excuses? Do they consider your feelings or only focus on their needs? Joyce Meyer had to learn this distinction with Dave. She realized that his need for space or different preferences weren't character flaws, they were personality differences. But if he had been consistently selfish, dishonest, or disrespectful, those would have been character issues requiring serious conversation and potential consequences. Building healthy relationships also requires emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize and manage your own emotions while being sensitive to others' emotional states. Rejection wounds often damage emotional intelligence by making us hypervigilant about threats while being blind to our own emotional impact on others. Recovery involves learning to regulate your emotions instead of expecting others to manage them for you. When you feel triggered by something someone says or does, the healthy response is to pause, identify what you're feeling and why, then choose how to respond rather than simply reacting from the wound. Ginger Stash practiced this during her marriage restoration. When her husband said or did something that triggered her fear or insecurity, instead of immediately attacking or withdrawing, she learned to say, "I'm feeling scared right now because this reminds me of before. Can we talk about what's happening?" This created safety for both of them to address issues without blame or shame. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, shared values, emotional safety, and the freedom to be authentic. They include conflict because authentic people don't agree about everything. But the conflict is respectful and aimed at understanding and resolution rather than winning or punishing. Here are some practical characteristics of healthy relationships. Both people take responsibility for their part in problems. Both people can apologize genuinely when they're wrong. Both people celebrate each other's successes without competition. Both people can express needs without manipulation. Both people respect boundaries even when they disagree with them. One crucial skill is learning to communicate needs directly rather than expecting others to read your mind or pick up on hints. Rejection wounds often make us afraid to ask for what we need because asking risks being told no. But indirect communication creates confusion and resentment that damages relationships more than direct requests ever could. Joyce Meyer learned to say things like, "I'm feeling disconnected from you this week. Could we plan some time to talk?" Instead of becoming moody and waiting for Dave to figure out what was wrong. This direct approach created clarity instead of confusion and gave Dave the opportunity to respond positively. Building healthy relationships also requires ending unhealthy ones. Sometimes people won't respect your boundaries no matter how clearly you communicate them. Some people are committed to dysfunction and will resist your growth. Some relationships were built on mutual brokenness and can't survive mutual healing. This is painful but necessary. Ginger Stash had to distance herself from people who wanted her to stay bitter about her marriage struggles, who couldn't celebrate her healing, or who tried to undermine her commitment to restoration. Protecting your healing sometimes requires protecting yourself from people who preferred your brokenness. The beautiful result of building healthy relationship skills is that you begin attracting people who are also committed to growth, authenticity, and mutual respect. As you become healthier, you naturally connect with others who value health. Action step: evaluate one important relationship in your life using these questions. Do we both take responsibility for problems? Can we both apologize when wrong? Do we respect each other's boundaries? Based on your answers, identify one specific way you can contribute to making this relationship healthier this week. Chapter 7, Replacing Lies with Truth, Renewing Your Mind for Lasting Change. Your mind is like a computer that's been programmed with rejection's lies for years, maybe decades. These lies run automatically in the background of your thoughts, influencing every decision and relationship without your conscious awareness. But here's the hope. You can reprogram your mind with truth that creates freedom instead of bondage. The lies' rejection plants are sophisticated and persistent. They sound like facts rather than opinions. Nobody really cares about you. You always mess things up. You're too difficult to love. Something is wrong with you. You can't trust anyone. You're not worth fighting for. These lies become the lens through which you interpret every situation. Joyce Meyer lived under the tyranny of these lies for decades. Her mind constantly told her that Dave's behavior was evidence of her unworthiness, that people were just tolerating her presence, and that disaster was always just around the corner. She was exhausted from fighting thoughts that felt true even when her circumstances said otherwise. The breakthrough came when Joyce realized that thoughts aren't facts. They're just mental events that can be evaluated, challenged, and changed. She began practicing what she calls thought warfare, actively replacing lies with biblical truth instead of passively accepting whatever came to mind. This isn't positive thinking or self-help mantras. This is aligning your thoughts with God's thoughts about you. When rejection whispers you're worthless, truth declares you are fearfully and wonderfully made. When rejection hisses nobody loves you, truth proclaims you are loved with an everlasting love. When rejection insists you're a failure, truth announces you are more than a conqueror. Ginger Stash had to fight similar battles during her marriage crisis. Her mind constantly replayed her husband's betrayal, predicted future disasters, and told her she was foolish to hope for restoration. She felt like she was drowning in toxic thoughts that felt completely reasonable given her circumstances. But Ginger learned that feelings follow thoughts, not the other way around. When she allowed her mind to rehearse worst-case scenarios, she felt hopeless and afraid. When she chose to focus on God's faithfulness and her husband's genuine repentance, she felt peaceful and hopeful. Same circumstances, different thoughts, completely different emotional experience. Here's the key insight both women discovered. You can't stop negative thoughts from coming, but you can choose which ones you invite to stay. Your mind is like a hotel. Every thought wants to check in, but you're the manager who decides which ones get a room for the night. The process requires what Joyce Meyer calls mental monitoring, paying attention to your automatic thoughts instead of letting them run unchecked. When you catch yourself thinking something negative about your worth, your future, or your relationships, pause and ask, is this thought helping me or hurting me? Is it based on truth or on past wounds? Most people never question their thoughts. They just believe whatever their minds produce. But thoughts are not automatically true just because you think them. Many of your thoughts are based on old programming from rejection wounds rather than current reality or eternal truth. Replacing lies with truth requires repetition and persistence. Ginger Stash created what she calls a truth playlist, scriptures and affirmations about her identity that she repeated daily, especially when she felt triggered. She discovered that her mind needed to hear truth more often than lies to begin shifting its default programming. The lies don't give up easily. They've had years to establish themselves in your mental pathways, and they'll fight for their territory. You might feel silly or fake repeating truths that contradict your feelings. This is normal and doesn't mean the process isn't working. It means your mind is being retrained. Joyce Meyer explains, I had to speak truth to myself for months before my emotions caught up with my confession. But every day I chose to think God's thoughts instead of rejection's lies, I felt a little freer from the prison of negative thinking that had controlled my life. The practical method is simple but not easy. Identify your most persistent negative thoughts, find biblical truths that contradict those lies, and consistently replace the lies with truth every time they surface. This requires vigilance, but it's the path to lasting mental freedom. For example, if your dominant lie is, nobody really cares about me, your truth replacement might be, I am loved by the Creator of the universe, and He places people in my life who genuinely care. If your lie is, I always mess things up, your truth might be, God works all things together for good, including my mistakes. This mental renewal process affects everything, your confidence, your relationships, your decision-making, your emotional stability, and your sense of purpose. When your mind is programmed with truth instead of lies, you naturally make better choices because you're operating from freedom rather than fear. Ginger Stash describes the transformation. I went from a woman whose mind was constantly rehearsing disasters to a woman whose mind naturally looked for God's goodness and faithfulness. It didn't change my circumstances overnight, but it completely changed my experience of my circumstances. The most powerful truth that counteracts all of rejection's lies is this: you are completely known and completely loved by perfect love. Every lie rejection tells is contradicted by this one overwhelming reality. When this truth becomes more real to you than rejection's lies, everything changes. Here's the commitment required. For the next 30 days, catch every negative thought about yourself and immediately replace it with a biblical truth. Don't wait until you feel like it or until it seems true. Choose truth because it is true, regardless of how you feel about it. Action step: identify the most frequent negative thought you have about yourself. Find one biblical truth that contradicts this lie. Write both on a card and carry it with you. Every time the lie surfaces this week, immediately read the truth out loud. Your mind needs to hear a different voice than rejection's whisper. Chapter 8: Learning to Trust Again. Moving from self-protection to wise vulnerability. Trust might be the most challenging frontier in healing from rejection wounds. After being hurt deeply, the idea of opening your heart again can feel like volunteering for more pain. But here's the truth: a life without trust is a life without love, joy, or meaningful connection. The goal isn't to become naive, it's to become wise. Many people confuse trust with stupidity, thinking that trusting again means ignoring red flags or pretending people can't hurt them. But wise trust is different. It's choosing to believe the best about people while preparing for the possibility of disappointment. It's giving people opportunities to prove themselves trustworthy while maintaining healthy boundaries. Joyce Meyer had to rebuild trust in her relationship with Dave after years of believing he was her enemy rather than her partner. Her rejection wounds had convinced her that his every action was motivated by selfishness or disregard for her feelings. She had to learn to give him the benefit of the doubt instead of assuming the worst about his intentions. The process started with small steps. Instead of interpreting Dave's silence as rejection, Joyce began asking, "What are you thinking about?" Instead of assuming his different preferences meant he didn't care about her, she began seeing them as personality differences rather than personal attacks. Each positive interaction built evidence that he could be trusted with her heart. Ginger Stash faced an even more challenging trust reconstruction after her husband's betrayal. She had to learn the difference between blind trust and wise trust. Blind trust ignores evidence and hopes for the best. Wise trust pays attention to consistent behavior over time and adjusts accordingly. Ginger didn't immediately trust her husband with everything after he entered recovery. She trusted him with small things first and allowed him to earn greater trust through consistent, trustworthy behavior. She verified his recovery progress, set clear boundaries, and gradually opened her heart as he proved his commitment to change. Here's the key insight about trust: it's not all or nothing. You can trust someone with some things but not others. Trust them today while being willing to adjust tomorrow. Trust their heart while being cautious about their habits. Trust is a spectrum, not a switch. The foundation of wise trust is trusting yourself specifically, trusting your ability to handle whatever happens in relationships. When you know you can survive disappointment, betrayal, or loss, you can risk trust without desperation. When you're confident in your worth regardless of others' behavior, you can love without clinging. This self-trust comes from experiencing God's faithfulness through difficult seasons. Joyce Meyer learned to trust her ability to handle Dave's humanity because she had discovered God's strength in her weakness. She didn't need Dave to be perfect because she had a perfect God who would never leave or forsake her. Ginger Stash developed this same confidence during her marriage crisis. She realized that even if her marriage didn't survive, she would be okay because God's love was unshakable. This knowledge freed her to work on restoration without desperation, to hope without demanding guarantees. Learning to trust again also requires accepting that all human relationships involve risk. There are no guarantees that people won't hurt, disappoint, or leave you. But the alternative to risk is isolation, and isolation guarantees the very loneliness that rejection wounds fear most. The goal is to become someone who can love and trust wisely rather than fearfully. This means paying attention to people's character over time, communicating clearly about needs and boundaries, and responding appropriately when trust is broken rather than either ignoring problems or ending relationships prematurely. Trust is rebuilt through consistency over time. One kind gesture doesn't erase past betrayal, but consistent kindness over months and years can rebuild confidence in someone's character. One failure doesn't destroy all trust, but a pattern of failures requires serious evaluation and possibly professional help. Joyce Meyer learned to distinguish between normal human imperfection and character flaws that threatened the relationship's foundation. Dave's occasional insensitivity was disappointing but workable. If he had been consistently cruel or dishonest, that would have required different responses. The process of learning to trust includes learning to receive apologies well and make them authentically. Real apologies acknowledge specific wrongdoing, express genuine remorse, and include commitment to change. Fake apologies minimize the hurt, blame the victim, or make promises that aren't kept. Ginger Stash had to learn to receive her husband's apologies without immediately dismissing them or demanding more proof of his sincerity. She also had to learn to apologize for her own failures, her bitterness, her withdrawal, her attempts to punish him for his betrayal. Mutual accountability created safety for both of them. Here's a practical framework for rebuilding trust. Start with small vulnerabilities with safe people. Pay attention to how they handle these opportunities. Gradually increase your openness as they prove trustworthy, and maintain appropriate boundaries based on the level of trust you've established. This doesn't mean keeping score or testing people constantly. It means being aware of patterns over time and adjusting your level of vulnerability accordingly. Some people earn deep trust quickly through consistent character. Others reveal themselves to be trustworthy only with certain things. Still others prove themselves untrustworthy and need to be loved from a distance. The beautiful result of learning wise trust is that it allows for authentic intimacy without naivety. You can be vulnerable without being reckless, open without being defenseless, hopeful without being unrealistic. This creates space for the deep connections that heal rejection wounds and make life rich and meaningful. Joyce Meyer describes her transformed relationship with Dave. I learned to trust him not because he was perfect, but because he was consistently committed to our relationship and my well-being. I could risk my heart with him because I knew he would handle it carefully, even when he made mistakes. Action step. Think of one relationship where trust has been damaged. Identify one small way this person could begin rebuilding your trust through consistent behavior. Communicate this clearly to them and give them the opportunity to prove themselves trustworthy in this small area before expecting trust in larger matters. Chapter 9. Helping others heal, becoming a source of healing rather than hurt. One of the most beautiful fruits of healing from rejection is developing the ability to help others who are still trapped in rejection's lies. Your wounds can become sources of wisdom, your scars can become symbols of hope, and your healing journey can become a roadmap for others who are still lost in the pain. But there's a crucial distinction between helping others heal and trying to fix everyone around you. Many people who have been wounded become what psychologists call wounded healers. They're so focused on rescuing others that they neglect their own continued healing and create codependent relationships that ultimately help no one. Joyce Meyer had to learn this balance as her ministry grew. Her passion to help hurting people was genuine and God-given, but she initially approached ministry from her own unhealed places. She was trying to prove her worth by being indispensable to others, which created exhaustion and resentment rather than sustainable service. The transformation came when Joyce realized that effective ministry flows from overflow, not emptiness. She had to maintain her own relationship with God, continue her own healing process, and serve from fullness rather than need. This shift made her ministry more powerful and sustainable. Ginger Stash discovered this same principle during her marriage restoration. Friends and family members who were struggling in their own relationships began asking for her advice and support. While she wanted to help, she quickly realized that she could only give what she had received. She couldn't offer wisdom about forgiveness if she wasn't practicing it, or hope about restoration if she wasn't believing it herself. Here's the foundational truth about helping others heal. Hurt people, but healed people heal people. Your ability to offer authentic help is directly connected to your own level of healing. You can't give what you don't have, and you can't lead where you haven't been. This doesn't mean you have to be completely healed before you can help anyone else. Healing is a journey, not a destination, and some of the most powerful help comes from people who are a few steps ahead on the path rather than those who seem to have arrived. Your current struggles can actually create empathy and connection with others facing similar challenges. The key is being honest about where you are in your own healing journey. Joyce Meyer learned to say things like, "I'm still learning this too, but here's what's helping me," rather than positioning herself as someone who had mastered everything. This honesty created safety for others to be authentic about their own struggles. Effective help requires wisdom about timing and readiness. Not everyone is ready to hear truth about healing, and trying to force insight on someone who isn't receptive usually creates resistance rather than growth. Ginger Stash learned to listen more than she spoke and to ask permission before offering advice. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is simply witness someone's pain without trying to fix it. Many people with rejection wounds feel like their hurt is too much, too dramatic, or too complicated for others to understand. Your presence and empathy can be more healing than any advice you could offer. Joyce Meyer describes learning to say, "I'm so sorry you're going through this. I've been in similar places and I know how painful it is," rather than immediately jumping to solutions or silver linings. People need to feel heard and understood before they're ready to receive guidance. When you do share your story, focus on God's faithfulness through your struggles rather than the details of your wounds. The goal isn't to impress people with how much you've suffered, but to inspire them with how good God has been in the midst of suffering. Your testimony should point to His healing power, not your personal strength. Ginger Stash learned to share her marriage restoration story by emphasizing God's grace, her husband's genuine repentance, and the healing power of forgiveness, rather than focusing on the betrayal details. This approach gave hope to other couples while maintaining appropriate privacy about painful specifics. Helping others also requires maintaining healthy boundaries about how much support you can offer. It's tempting to become someone's unofficial therapist or spiritual guide, but this level of responsibility often recreates codependent patterns and prevents people from developing their own relationship with God and healthy support systems. The most sustainable approach is to point people toward professional resources when needed while offering friendship and encouragement as you're able. Joyce Meyer learned to say, "I think talking to a counselor would really help you work through this. I'm here as your friend, but you need more professional support than I can provide." Sometimes helping others heal means setting boundaries with people who want to stay stuck in their pain. Some people become addicted to sharing their wounds and resist any suggestion that healing is possible. While you can empathize with their pain, you don't have to enable their choice to remain a victim. Ginger Stash had to distance herself from people who wanted her to stay bitter about her marriage struggles or who criticized her choice to work toward restoration. She learned that protecting her healing sometimes meant protecting herself from people who preferred her brokenness to her wholeness. The most powerful way to help others heal is simply by living as a healed person. When people see you loving well, trusting wisely, and responding to disappointments with grace rather than devastation, it gives them hope that transformation is possible for them too. Joyce Meyer puts it this way: "The best way I can help others heal from rejection is by being living proof that rejection wounds don't have to define your story. When people see that I'm genuinely happy, healthy in my relationships, and confident in God's love despite my past, it gives them permission to hope for the same transformation." Your healing journey isn't just about your freedom. It's about becoming a source of hope and wisdom for others who are still trapped in rejection's lies. But remember that your primary responsibility is your own continued healing, and your help to others should flow from that foundation. Action step: think of one person in your life who might be struggling with rejection wounds. Instead of trying to fix their situation, simply ask them, "How are you really doing?" Then listen without offering advice unless they specifically ask for it. Sometimes the most healing gift is simply being heard and understood. Chapter 10, Living Rejection Proof, Maintaining Your Freedom and Helping Others Find Theirs. Living rejection proof doesn't mean you'll never experience rejection again. It means rejection will no longer have the power to define your worth, control your choices, or destroy your peace. You'll feel the sting of disappointment without being devastated by it. You'll experience the sadness of loss without losing yourself in despair. This is the ultimate goal of healing from rejection wounds, developing an unshakable confidence that isn't dependent on others' approval or behavior. It's discovering a security so deep that human rejection becomes disappointing but not devastating, painful but not paralyzing. Joyce Meyer describes this transformation in her own life. I went from being a woman who was destroyed by any hint of disapproval to being a woman who could receive correction, handle criticism, and even experience rejection without losing my sense of worth or my faith in God's love for me. This didn't happen overnight or through one dramatic breakthrough. It was the result of consistently choosing truth over lies, God's voice over people's opinions, and faith over fear. Each time she chose to believe God's love despite human rejection, her confidence grew stronger and more unshakable. Ginger Stash experienced a similar transformation through her marriage restoration journey. She went from being a woman whose happiness depended entirely on her husband's behavior to being a woman whose joy came from God's love expressed through her marriage, but not dependent on her marriage's perfection. Living rejection-proof requires daily maintenance of your spiritual and emotional health. Just like physical fitness requires ongoing exercise and good nutrition, emotional fitness requires ongoing practices that reinforce your identity in God's love and renew your mind with truth. This includes regular time in prayer and scripture, where you hear God's voice about your worth and identity. It includes maintaining healthy relationships that reflect God's love and speak truth into your life. It includes ongoing learning and growth that keeps you moving forward rather than sliding backward into old patterns. Joyce Meyer emphasizes that rejection-proof living isn't about becoming emotionally numb or disconnected from others. It's about loving and being loved from a place of security rather than desperation. It's caring deeply about relationships while not being controlled by them. One key aspect is learning to interpret others' behavior accurately rather than through the lens of rejection sensitivity. When someone is having a bad day, you don't assume it's about you. When someone disagrees with you, you don't question your worth. When someone chooses differently than you hoped, you're disappointed but not devastated. This interpretive skill comes from understanding that most people's behavior is about them, their mood, their stress, their preferences, their limitations, rather than about your value as a person. Ginger Stash learned to ask herself, is this about me or is this about them? Before reacting to others' behavior. Another crucial element is maintaining what both authors call appropriate expectations of people. Expecting others to be perfect, always available, or constantly affirming sets you up for disappointment and them up for failure. Expecting others to be human, imperfect, and limited creates space for grace and realistic relationship dynamics. Joyce Meyer had to learn to expect Dave to be a wonderful but imperfect husband rather than demanding that he meet all her emotional needs perfectly. This shift allowed her to appreciate his love as a gift rather than demanding it as a requirement. Living rejection-proof also means becoming secure enough to set and maintain healthy boundaries without guilt or fear. When you know your worth isn't determined by others' approval, you can say no to requests that violate your values or overwhelm your capacity. You can address problems directly rather than hoping they'll disappear. Ginger Stash learned to communicate her needs clearly in her restored marriage, rather than expecting her husband to read her mind or feeling selfish for having needs. This directness created clarity and safety for both of them. The beautiful paradox of rejection-proof living is that it makes you more attractive to healthy people and less attractive to unhealthy ones. When you're not desperate for approval, you naturally draw people who appreciate confidence. When you're not willing to compromise your values for acceptance, you repel people who would take advantage of your insecurity. This means your relationships become more authentic and satisfying. You attract people who love the real you rather than people who are drawn to your neediness or your willingness to be mistreated. Joyce Meyer describes how her relationship with Dave improved dramatically when she stopped trying to earn his love and started simply receiving it. Living rejection-proof also includes developing resilience for when rejection does occur. Because it will occur, not everyone will like you, choose you, or appreciate you, and that's normal and acceptable. The goal is to respond to rejection with grace rather than devastation. This might mean feeling sad about a lost friendship while remaining confident in your lovability. It might mean being disappointed about a missed opportunity while trusting that better opportunities are coming. It might mean grieving an ended relationship while believing that you're still worthy of love. Ginger Stash puts it this way: I learned that rejection says more about fit than it does about worth. When someone doesn't choose me, it usually means we weren't a good match, not that I'm inherently rejectable. This perspective allows me to learn from rejection without being destroyed by it. The ultimate fruit of rejection-proof living is becoming a source of healing and hope for others. When people see you loving well, handling disappointment with grace, and maintaining joy despite imperfect relationships, it gives them permission to hope for the same transformation. Your healed life becomes a testimony to God's faithfulness and a roadmap for others who are still trapped in rejection's lies. You become living proof that wounds can heal, that trust can be rebuilt, and that love can be received and given without fear. Joyce Meyer reflects on this impact. The greatest joy of my healing journey is seeing thousands of other people discover the same freedom I've found. When rejection wounds are healed, it doesn't just change your life, it changes the lives of everyone you influence. Action step: commit to one daily practice that reinforces your identity in God's love, whether it's morning prayer, scripture reading, worship, or affirmations of truth. Make this practice non-negotiable for the next 30 days and notice how it affects your response to both acceptance and rejection from others. Over the past 45 minutes, we've journeyed through Joyce Meyer and Ginger Stash's groundbreaking wisdom in healing the wounds of rejection, a book that has become a lifeline for millions trapped in the pain of past hurts and the fear of future rejection. Let's recap the 10 transformational insights we've discovered. First, rejection wounds create hidden patterns that sabotage our relationships until we address them at their root. Second, rejection operates through disguises like perfectionism and people-pleasing that seem protective but actually perpetuate isolation. Third, God's unconditional love provides the only unshakable foundation for true security. Fourth, the walls we build for protection become prisons that keep out the very love we need to heal. Fifth, forgiveness frees us more than it frees others, breaking the chains of bitterness that keep us trapped in the past. Sixth, healthy relationships require wisdom, boundaries, and the willingness to risk trust gradually with trustworthy people. Seventh, our minds can be reprogrammed with truth that creates freedom instead of bondage. Eighth, learning to trust again means becoming wise rather than naive, building confidence through consistent character over time. Ninth, our healing journey equips us to help others find freedom, but only when we serve from overflow rather than emptiness. Finally, living rejection-proof means rejection loses its power to define us, control us, or destroy our peace. Meyer and Stash's research reveals that emotional healing is spiritual warfare. When you challenge rejection at its root, you're dismantling spiritual strongholds that have held countless people captive. Most importantly, your worth was established before you were born by a God who knew exactly who you would become and called you precious anyway. Here's what I want you to remember from healing the wounds of rejection. Your past wounds don't have to write your future story. Your deepest hurts can become your greatest sources of wisdom and compassion. Your healing doesn't depend on others treating you perfectly. It flows from discovering a love so secure that human rejection loses its power to devastate you. The practices Meyer and Stash outline: replacing lies with truth, building healthy boundaries, learning wise trust. These aren't one-time activities. They're daily choices that gradually transform you from wounded to whole, from guarded to genuinely confident. Start small. Choose one lie rejection has told you about yourself and replace it with biblical truth. Remember that healing is a journey of daily choices, not a one-time event. By applying the principles in healing the wounds of rejection, you're not just changing your own story. You're becoming living proof that rejection wounds can heal, that trust can be rebuilt, and that love without fear is possible. Your freedom journey starts now. Choose healing, choose truth, choose the unshakable love that makes you rejection-proof.